The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, with support services designed to help seniors age in place, including a Compass Memory Support Neighborhood. More at armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. It's Friday, September 6, 2024. School's back in session, and so are we. This week's Rundowners: veteran reporter Paul Tudhill, reporter and columnist G. Michael Dobbs, and Nirvani Williams, a reporter with NEPM. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Good morning.
Later in the show, we'll discuss the fact that after arrests and a tense end to last semester, UMass Amherst students return with conflicted feelings. Also, a new task force is out with its report. And, just in time for the NFL season, new details on problem gambling in the age of sports betting. If you have thoughts on that or anything that comes up during your show, maybe you want to tell us what you did with your summer vacation, our email, therundown@nepm.org. That's therundown@nepm.org. Now, on to Tuesday's primary. Western Mass and voters statewide on Tuesday picked John Deaton as the Republican nominee to face U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren. There were 3 races with primary challenges here in Western Mass, and we'll get to those in just a bit. But overall, the trend of uncontested races continued. Only 26 of 160 House districts and 6 of the 40 Senate districts saw a contested primary in either major political party, even though all 200 districts are up for grabs every 2 years, as we know. The Secretary of State, William Galvin, forecast turnout for the primary would hit 15%. Turnout that we know of in Springfield and Chicopee was lower than that, and Springfield being the largest city in Western Mass, that was of note for me. About 10% we saw in Springfield, and even with competitive races for the State House and Senate. In those races, incumbents did hold their seats, but everybody here on the panel, for me, it was a tale of 2 very different vote counts in those 2 races. We saw Hampton District State Senator Adam Gomez faced a challenge from Springfield City Councilor Mallow Brown. Gomez won that by a 3-2 margin. Mike, that race saw accusations of ethics and campaign violations, and you moderated a debate between the 2 candidates that was quite fiery at times. What are your thoughts on where this race landed?
I think that ultimately the incumbency of Adam Gomez and his record as a first-time senator brought him over the finishing line. Mallow Brown did not do himself any favors by simply adapting the strategy of attack, and saying things that were patently untrue. Mallow's claim that he had a better working relationship with Governor Healy was blown right out of the water when Healy decided to endorse Gomez. So,
yeah.
It also, I think, just points out that in the city of Springfield, we like our incumbents. And if you're going to unseat an incumbent, you better come up with real hard, good information why voters should reject that person.
And it was also a bit of a different narrative than we saw elsewhere in the state. We saw a few incumbents upset in some races elsewhere.
Not very many.
No, not very many, but still.
There were 19 incumbents, 19 incumbent state legislators who had challengers on Tuesday, and only 2 lost, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. There is one race where an incumbent in Cambridge is hanging on by about 40 votes.
They're still counting.
And there may be a recount there.
Yep.
But the fact remains, it is extremely hard to defeat an incumbent state legislator, and that's why most people don't try.
Well, we saw in Springfield with State Rep Bud Williams, it was very close. Speaking of the tale of 2 votes there, 234 was the difference between Bud Williams, state representative incumbent, and his challenger, Johnny McKnight. And that stood out to me for sure because Bud Williams has not only been state representative for the better part of 7 years, but he has 20 years plus history as a city councilor in the city of Springfield.
Yeah, almost 30 years.
Yeah. And so here's what Williams said. He said that voters sent a collective message at the ballot box, and then he added this.
They have said I should go back for a couple more years. I'm very excited and elated, an honor and a privilege to serve the 11th Hamden District.
Paul, where are you coming out on this, given the 234 vote margin?
Percentage-wise, Williams got 53% of the votes. So, I mean, that's pretty comfortable. And the turnout was so low. I think in that particular race, it was less than 10%, the less than 10% voter turnout in the 11th Hamden District. The numbers that we're talking about are just so small that I mean, total voter turnout is just so small that I don't think the 240 vote margin or whatever it was is
not a big deal for you.
Not a big deal for me. Absolutely not a big deal for me. A win is a win is a win, whether it's by 1 vote or 1,000 votes.
However, if I was Bud Williams, which I'm not, if I was Bud Williams, I would be saying a somewhat stronger candidate, a candidate with a little bit more experience and a little bit more money and a little bit more door knocking, and I'm done. I am done. Because I understand a win is a win in politics, just like it is in sports. But he didn't crush him, not like how Gomez crushed Milo Brown.
Yeah, 3-1 on that margin.
Agreed. Now find the candidate that's going to run against him.
Well, it remains to be seen. Nirvani, you did a preview on this race. Anything that stands out to you as we've seen the vote tally come in here this week?
I mean, I think McKnight might not have been the candidate to completely defeat Bud Williams, but he brought up a lot of great points, and I think one of them is that he was door knocking, and he said that a lot of people really want something new, and that the days of Bud Williams just haven't worked. But his campaign didn't really reflect that a whole lot. And Williams, I mean, held a large fundraising advantage over McKnight with over $180,000 in money at the end of July, whereas McKnight's campaign reported a little over $8,000. So, I mean, there were a lot of differences there, but I totally agree.
Again, speaks to the power of the incumbency, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the formula, if you're going to go after an incumbent, and this was the case in the race that we alluded to earlier in Cambridge, where Marjorie Decker, the incumbent Democrat, 6-term Democrat, is hanging on by about 40 votes. You run against the institution of the legislature, not the individual. You tie the individual legislator, who may be popular, to the status quo on Beacon Hill. And there's plenty to rail about when it comes to the state legislature and their lack of transparency and their lack of action at the end of the most recent session.
Yeah. I'm going to move us on to election news from the Berkshires in just a second, but I want to point out an interesting connection between these two contested races in Springfield, the area which the area voters here obviously saw. Senator Adam Gomez's challenger, Milo Brown, is State Rep Bud Williams' current chief of staff.
Yep.
So that raises a lot of questions for me, as we all know here. State legislators, whether it's the Senate or the House, they're working together to get things done on behalf of the broader Western Mass region. Are we going to need to have some kind of a team building retreat after this election, or where do you see this impacting, if at all?
Well, there is an unwritten rule in the legislature, and I'm sure that Paul's heard it as well, that if you're a senator or a rep and you have a staff member who is planning to run against a current sitting senator or rep, that's a no-no. You're not supposed to allow that to happen. That's this idea of some sort of element of etiquette within the legislature. And I do know that there was criticism about the fact that Milo Brown ran against Senator Gomez based on that.
And there were challenges that came up saying that Mr. Brown was campaigning during what would be state money time or staff time, where he should have been, focused on his work for Mr. Williams. That was not proven out to be true, I believe, right? It was unfounded, but still those allegations came to be part of what happened during the course of this legislative election. All right, news from the Berkshire Eagles, Greg Sukinik. Lee Davis won the Democratic nomination for the 3rd Berkshire District State Representative seat. Davis is a housing advocate and vice chair of the Great Barrington Select Board. She ran against Stockbridge Select Board members Patrick White and Jamie Menachie. Incumbent State Representative William Smitty Pignatelli, I think, looked at the numbers, said 22 years of driving from Lenox to Boston. I'm all set.
Despite that per diem he gets for doing it.
He decided did. It wasn't worth the gas money, right? He announced in February that he wasn't seeking re-election. We'll see Davis face an unenrolled candidate, Mary Beth Mitz, in the November 5th general election, which is another interesting point, right? These primaries that we saw, many of them that we've talked about, they're essentially going to have the seat because they are not facing challengers in November. Anything on the Berkshire's race that stood out to you?
I'm afraid I did not follow it.
I did. I wasn't following that one too closely either, I must confess.
Hearing none, I will move us. I will move us along, and we will see in Western Mass a handful of state legislative races heading into the November election. We've got House challenges, the U.S. Senate, which we're going to talk about in just a second, and of course, that tiny little presidential race will also be on the November ballot.
And don't forget the ballot questions,
Yes,
which will be a big deal in Massachusetts, are a big deal in Massachusetts.
Absolutely. So speaking of that U.S. Senate seat, we did see Republican John Deaton challenging Democrat Elizabeth Warren. He was one of 3 Republicans on the ticket, and he won handily. He describes himself in his campaign materials as someone who grew up in extreme poverty in Michigan and was the first in his family to graduate from high school and college. He subsequently served in the Marines and worked as a trial lawyer. He described himself to GBH News as, quote, a common-sense conservative, socially moderate Republican. Reaction to Deaton coming out on top here?
Right out of the Charlie Baker playbook, I guess, with that description, and it's not surprising because there were political operatives for Charlie Baker who were working on Deaton's campaign.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes. Democratic political analyst, longtime Democratic political analyst Mary Ann Marsh was quoted as saying, "It is impossible for a Republican to win a statewide election in Massachusetts in a presidential election year." And taking a brief look back, I think she's right. I think if Deaton can get on the debate stage with Senator Warren, make some intelligent arguments about issues that voters are truly concerned about, not promote conspiracy theories or question the outcome of an election that happened 4 years ago, it'll go a long way towards helping the Massachusetts Republican Party rebuild some of its credibility. But I think that's the best that the Republicans can hope for here.
We'll see where the debates land. I know that Senator Warren has said she has agreed to 2, one in the eastern part of the state and one that would be hosted by NEPM and
Sure.
WGBH. And Deaton says he wants 5 debates.
Well,
so we'll see.
He'll get the 2. He'll get the 2, and he should be happy to get the 2.
The only thing I can say about him, because I haven't had the chance to speak to this guy yet, is I've seen some of his commercials, and he comes right out and says, I'm going to lower your taxes. I'm going to solve the border issue. I'm very tired of someone who's never been in office before, and I don't think he has, saying that he, as an individual member of the Senate, would be solving issues that are so freaking monumental. It really just sort of offends me that he couldn't say something like, I'm going to work for the people of Massachusetts. I'm going to be there. You know, Western Massachusetts, you see Elizabeth Warren maybe once or twice a year with one of her town halls. I'm going to be different. I'll be your senator. He could say something like that, and that would have real meaning. But the other stuff to me is just these buzzwords that he will have absolutely no power over.
Do you think part of that challenge comes from the fact that I think Paul pointed out before we went to air, he lived in Rhode Island prior to this, but he's new to Massachusetts. He lives in Worcester County, but hasn't lived in the state for all that long. Is going right for the U.S. Senate.
I would propose to him, why don't you get on your select board first? Why don't you look at how government in Massachusetts works on the ground level, and then build yourself up? I will never understand why people with no experience in government whatsoever, then decide they're going to be our savior.
Republicans in Massachusetts have never worked on, quote unquote, building their bench. They don't have anybody on a select board or, a school committee or somewhere lower down the line that they can move up and run for a statewide office. The people just aren't there.
So I guess that means just you end up swinging for the fences, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to keep the election news coming here at NEPM, but for right now, the rundown, we're going to take a quick break. But stay here because still ahead, our rundowners react to a new report in response to last year's on-campus protests at UMass Amherst and details on problem gambling in the age of sports betting, just as the Pats take the field on Sunday. today. Plus, predictions, scoops, and praise from our news crew. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Rundown. I'm Carrie Saldo here with Paul Tunhill, Mike Dobbs, and Nirvani Williams, hitting the high notes of this week's news from Western Mass. Nirvani, let's turn to you, reporting that you did for the NEPM newsroom this week. The headline, Task Force Set Up After UMass Amherst Protests Arrest Publishes Report and Makes Recommendations. Now, UMass Amherst released a report Wednesday from a task force formed over the summer to make recommendations on policies and guidelines for students who want to protest on campus. Now, before we get into the details, Nirvani, remind us why the university established this task force to begin with.
Absolutely. So back in May, the student-run group, Students for Justice in Palestine, created an encampment at UMass to stand in solidarity with Palestinians as the war in Gaza escalated. And students, faculty members, and community members were protesting with the group. And when the encampment happened, UMass Chancellor Javier Reyes called state and university police to clear the encampment, where over 130 people, both students and faculty, were arrested. Reyes defended the move as a public safety measure, but since the arrests, Reyes has faced criticism from the Massachusetts ACLU and U.S. Representative Jim McGovern, and he also quickly lost votes of no confidence from the student government and faculty, which is...
It was a rough end of the semester for
end.
Chancellor Reyes, for sure,
Absolutely.
right? Any other details you wanted to share there? I jumped in.
No. I mean, after all of that, Reyes, I think, to try and salvage some of his trust from the university, announced the creation of this very long title of a name, Campus Demonstration Policy Task Force, which consists of students, faculty, and administrators from all different sorts of groups, and they just made their report public.
And I thought it was interesting, and it's an 11-page report, but it does make clear that the task force was established, after the protests, as you say, but the work of this task force is completely separate from a post-action review that the university is also doing. A lawyer is reviewing the events that had led up to the arrests and all of those other things. But regarding the task force, what are some of the proposed policies that stood out to you?
Some specific things that Reyes actually highlighted in a press release about the report involved, quote, removing ambiguities from what's known as the school's land use policy, which was a huge thing when the encampment was erected. He created there was a recommendation about creating a frequently asked questions page focused on free speech and developing de-escalation tactics for possible conflicts. I thought these were all really interesting.
Yeah, and something that stood out to me was that, and something we in fact discussed on this show, was that this trend of demonstrators either refusing to identify themselves to the media or police or members of staff after they had been either detained by the police or just stopped in general. And there was a recommendation in the report that says, quote, issue with the recommendation that the production of the identification be codified into policy as appropriate. So basically, I read that as cough up your identification, right? There's no free pass here. If you're going to protest in a public place, you should be naming yourself and making that information available. How do you think students are going to react to that particular piece, Nirvani?
I don't think they'll be reacting well. That's concerning to me because Reyes has said on multiple occasions and in multiple press releases that he wants to have productive and meaningful discussions with all of the groups involved and that he wants to have open dialogue with them. But this is sort of a shift in focus from that. And I think it's an interesting shift because that recommendation doesn't really open dialogue, which, again, he stated as something he really wants. And I spoke with a student from Students for Justice in Palestine, the group, Malia Cole, who said the report as a whole doesn't give the message of wanting to forge trust between the administration and its students. And Cole also said that they don't violently protest and for the administration to insinuate that these things could get violent is a really big red flag for her.
Paul,
One of the
Mike,
things,
any thoughts?
one of the things I found interesting in Nirvani's reporting was that Chancellor Reyes announced that he is no longer going to comment on matters that don't deal directly with the university's core mission and higher education. This is the same policy Harvard adopted in late May in response to their protests, and I think this is a big victory for the conservatives in the United States, as they are now losing these voices in social and geopolitical discourse.
Yeah, and we also saw, I think it was this week in the New York Times, Michael Roth, the president of Wesleyan University, disagreeing with Harvard's decision, and I assume he would disagree with Reyes as well, were he to comment based on what he said. He said it's the opposite of what you should be doing as the leader of a public institution.
A lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So it's another controversial decision by the chancellor of UMass.
Yeah, definitely.
Nirvani, the task report is out now. What are the next steps here?
Well, in the press release, Reyes said that over the next few weeks, the recommendations are going to be going to several bodies in the university to vote on and make their recommendations on the recommendations. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
It's the most academic thing ever. We'll make the recommendations on the recommendations.
On the recommendations and more.
All right. Well, Nirvani,
And then we'll have a commission to study the task
and a
force
committee
report.
on that. Yeah.
Nirvani will keep us up to date on all of it. Something that NEPM's Karen Brown looked at this week was problem gambling. She's been following this issue for quite some time for NEPM, going back to prior to the casinos even being instituted here. The headline on her story, going in the wrong direction, problem gambling up for regular bettors since mass okayed sports bets. Now, specifically with the help of online survey researchers, they tracked gambling behaviors among people who gamble regularly already and found that their rate of problem gambling went from 12% in 2014, which is after the casinos were legalized, to 25% in 2023, which is when after sports betting came onto the scene. Mike Dobbs, you once described casino gaming as the gift that keeps on giving for journalists because there's so many different angles to dig into. What's your reaction to these findings?
Damn straight it is. It just keeps getting better and better. Okay, there was a Boston Globe story recently about whether or not MGM was going to sell. There was a lot of analysis there, but there was one thing in it that really shocked me, and that is about 30% of the gaming revenue in the Commonwealth is from sports gaming. And in fact, it's growing and growing and growing. And part of the reason it's growing is we don't have to go to the casino to participate.
Just on your sweet little phone.
We can be sitting watching a game. Not that I do, because I'm not a sports fan, folks. I'm sorry. But you could be sitting and watching the game and actually make a bet during a game. This is impulse betting.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as I'm standing at a supermarket and those Reese's Pieces call out to me in the checkout
aisle,
right? This is impulse betting. And in fact, this piece in the Globe went on to say that companies like MGM are looking at this going, why are we having casinos? Because if we can put sports gaming on the phones, there are already apps for phones that allow you to do casino games.
Yeah, we're seeing that in Connecticut. I want to bring in something that UMass researcher Rachel Volberg says. About a quarter of habitual gamblers report harmful behavior, and about a third of them think gambling is already too widely available.
If you're a legislator in Massachusetts and you're looking at data that suggests overall attitudes about the availability of gambling are increasingly negative, you would want to be very careful about introducing any other new forms of gambling.
Paul, Mike alluded to it, other forms of gambling. Connecticut, it's legal to have online casino gaming on your phone. And for curiosity's sake, I did jump on their app, and it is geolocated, so you can't in Massachusetts vote in Connecticut. But do you think that pressure from Connecticut is going to start to creep in here in Massachusetts, Paul?
Beginning late next year, we're going to have the iLottery in Massachusetts. So, I mean, the horse has left the barn, right? I mean, we've already expanded gambling in Massachusetts, and there's not going to be any retreat from that. The money is just too easy. I mean, somebody once described the Massachusetts State Lottery as the tax people willingly line up to pay, and it's true.
Chris Serres reported for the Boston Globe in February that this online sports betting access we're seeing a growing number of young people showing up with mental health clinics and Gamblers Anonymous meetings, sometimes with their parents. Nirvani, it's illegal for anyone under 21 in Massachusetts to gamble online sports or just in general, you can't gamble. But tech and security measures are meant to block this, can be circumvented. Like, kids know ways to get around this. Any observations you have made around this as the youngest person on the panel this morning?
I looked into this a little bit and I saw that Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General, announced the creation of the Youth Sports Betting Safety Coalition, which is supposed to bring awareness to the risks and public health harms associated with underage people in sports gambling. And I'd be really interested to talk to, well, Campbell notes in a press release that the coalition will develop an evidence-based education, training, and health curriculum for middle, high schoolers, and college students in the state. And I'd be interested in speaking with these students who've received this training and just to see if it's effective and if more needs to be done, because it's really crazy. Sports betting is literally at the tips of your fingers with these apps, and I think the state should be doing a little bit more to protect kids from falling down addictive rabbit holes.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, if we all, after our broadcast, just walked over to MGM, there's going to be nobody there your age, young lady. It's all of us geezers. And the fact is, betting on your phone is going to be aimed squarely at your generation.
Yeah.
This is going to be your casino, your generation's casino, because older people still enjoy going and playing slots in person and the table games in person.
Definitely.
So I really see that, I have 3 grandchildren of various ages. This is going to be their challenge because all of this will be on their phones.
Yeah.
The marketing for sports advertising, I find it to be ubiquitous. And I do watch a lot of sports. And I think that marketing is one way to address this. You look at the report that came out yesterday about the sharp decline in the use of e-cigarettes by teenagers. Mm-hmm. Why did that happen? It's because the marketing for it was completely eliminated.
So maybe, perhaps, solving the world's problems here on the rundown, using some of that money that is mandated by the state as a result of gambling and casino gambling here could show up on phones right in front of people, because Karen Brown's done previous reporting that there's millions of dollars that's funneled into supposed treatment, but it doesn't seem to be trickling down to the level of those who need it, whether that's enough therapists available to folks or people being able to access those. Well, this is certainly an issue that's not going anywhere. I'm sure we'll keep talking about it here on the rundown. Let's head into our scoops, predictions, and praise portion of the morning. That's where we ask our panel to make a prediction about the news, dish about a story that they worked on, or heap some praise on a newsworthy nugget. I'll start with you today, Mike Dobbs.
I'm working on getting into the Paramount. The auction of the Paramount Theater block in Springfield is coming up September 23rd online through September 25th. I want to see what actual condition the Paramount is in. And the minimum auction
gambling on the brain
is only $250,000. But you think, I can own a city block for $250,000? Well, how much money is it going to cost to restore that block into something usable?
We will keep watching it. Nirvani Williams, for you, scoop, prediction, praise.
I interviewed Jonathan Stevens, who owns and is a baker at the Hungry Ghost Bread in Northampton, that little fun staple of Northampton's inner downtown working.
Deliciousness.
It's so good. The bread smells amazing. And I interviewed him about his new cookbook, so I'm excited to get that
We'll
out.
be watching for that. Great. Paul Tuthill, how about you?
I'll make a prediction that in November, question 1, which would explicitly give the state auditor the authority to audit the state legislature, will pass, and perhaps pass by a record amount. I'll say over 80%. There is no organized opposition to it, and who can say no to more transparency in state government?
Yeah. Right?
Really good journalist answer. Love that.
Well, I'm going to predict that Maura Healey is going to challenge Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont to a free throw competition, because Ned Lamont this week unveiled road signs that declared his state the basketball capital of the world.
What the hell is
He
that?
knocked that right down on social media. Springfield, of course, is the birthplace of basketball, right? And she's a former professional basketball player, so I think she'd swamp him.
Totally.
My money's totally on her if that actually happens. My thank you to this week's
Sell tickets to
rundowners. Paul Dunhill, Nirvani Williams, and Mike Dobbs. That's the rundown for September 6th here on NEPM. I'm Carrie Saldo. Join us next week.